Foolishness and courage. Orban and Fico are causing trouble for Ukraine again, even though there are as many as 7 tough and effective ways to punish Putin's friends. We'll talk about them in this episode. Riots in the USA. Trump sending the troops. And why do dictators just love military parades so much? Meanwhile, the Kremlin has declared that Ukraine and Russia are simply destined to be together, and they believe that we will wake up from the Western delusion and fall in love with brotherly Russia again. All this and more in today's episode. There will be a lot of interesting things. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So, let's get into it. In the past few days, there have been almost no statements from Trump or his administration about Ukraine or the war, but there is a statement that was made exactly 2 weeks ago, and it's definitely worth recalling. So, I quote, "This is Donald Trump. We will find out very soon whether Putin is fooling us or not. If he is, then we will respond a little differently. It will take about a week and a half to 2 weeks." Trump said exactly 2 weeks ago. Well, obviously, there are more pressing matters right now. There is concern about the protests within the United States. But Trump is also currently busy preparing for a big parade. It will take place on June 14th, coinciding with the 250th anniversary of the US Army. And on that same day, Trump will turn 79 years old. All in all, it will be a demonstration of the military and patriotic greatness of the United States. But on that day, millions of citizens in the US will take to the streets for the largest protest against Trump and his policies right on his birthday. Protests without any leaders will also take place on June 14th, 1,800 cities across 50 states and abroad, including overseas. Meanwhile, a curfew has been imposed in downtown Los Angeles. Overall, the idea behind this leaderless protest is to reflect the ideals of democracy and to emphasize civic engagement and opposition to the rise of authoritarianism. You see how things are in the United States? Who could have imagined? And the organizers state that the slogan isn't about kings or crowns, it's about the power of the people. Obviously, all of this will take place under the patronage of the Democrats. Well, in any case, we'll see. These are very large-scale rallies taking place across the country. The thing is, this won't lift Trump's spirits on his birthday, and it might seriously dampen the impression of the parade itself. But I wouldn't get too carried away with parades, because Trump really does want this to be the most powerful, to use Trump's own words, the most beautiful, the most beautiful, the most beautiful, the most wonderful, the most marvelous parade. Getting obsessed with parades never ends well. In general, parades, especially military ones, are a particular fetish of dictators. That is, practically all dictators love military parades. It's a display of their power, as they say, so that everyone is afraid, so that no one mocks them. Kim Jong-il immediately came to mind at that moment. And then there's Kim Jong-un, Putin, Saddam Hussein, Mussolini, Stalin, even Lukashenko with his poor but tidy parade. So all of this is necessary. Of course, Lukashenko can't roll missile launchers with nuclear weapons through the streets, but every year the Belarusian special forces delight everyone by breaking bottles over their heads, smashing roofing slate over their knees, and even breaking some giant construction slabs and blocks on their stomachs. This is really a separate kind of art. I feel like if you don't have proper technological weaponry, just smash roofing slate and bottles over your head. It's kind of an intimidation tactic, like the Maori dances. Well, when I was a kid in Sevastopol, I saw this kind of spectacle more than once. Paratroopers, they're usually the ones who do this, would show off these tricks, smashing various objects over their heads, mostly bottles. And one paratrooper, right in front of me, imagine, I was just a kid, he smashes this bottle over his head, and instantly blood just all over his face. Well, obviously, he got cut by the bottle. I don't know, maybe they'd somehow treat the bottles so they don't get cut. But anyway, even back then I realized there was something off about this whole bottle smashing thing. So why do dictators love parades so much? Because they simply can't exist without them. Because for a dictator, military parades aren't just some personal whim, they're also an act of intimidation, both for external enemies and for their own electorate. The people, the population inside the country, if you will. In other words, first and foremost, it's a demonstration, an argument. We are strong. Missiles, tanks, perfectly aligned rows of soldiers, all of this shows both the citizens, of course, and the enemies that resistance is futile. This is especially important for regimes with a shaky grip on reality. That is where there is little real power. There needs to be more of this kind of show of power. The cult of personality. The parade is a celebration in honor of the leader. I think many of you have noticed in dictatorial regimes, parades are first and foremost about 30% focused on the leader's face. He's on the podium, he's waving at something, he's reviewing the troops, he's in a car, he's on a boat, he's somewhere else. In other words, it's a demonstration of the leader. That is, the people are applauding not the army, but the leader himself. This is a substitution of meanings. That is, military might is presented as the personal achievement of the dictator. If he is frail, if he is old, then look, all of this is me, all this power is me. Well, just remember the May 9th parade in Moscow. Do you remember who was the focus of that parade? Chinese leader Xi Jinping was sitting there, and Putin was basically acting as his entertainer. So there you have it, the parade, the 9th of May. Xi Jinping was in fact absolutely really the one receiving the parade in Moscow. I think Russians may not have noticed this, especially Putin's supporters, but it was obvious. Fear and order, that's what it's about. Synchronization, discipline, obedience, everything happens on command. Citizen, look, everything works perfectly. That's how it should be in society too. You should march information and you should obey just like they do. And of course, it's a distraction from the real problems. The poorer the country, the worse things are with the economy, if you prefer the more grandiose the parade. That's why everything is kept under control. People are given visual proof of order. And now we're gonna move on to Orban and Fico. They're up to their antics again. But for now, I want to remind you not to forget to do one simple thing. Yes, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And here it is, my favorite segment, which, let's call it, salary just hit my Sberbank card. Orban got angry at Zelensky. That is, the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, reacted sharply to an interview given by Volodymyr Zelensky to a Hungarian publication. And Orban commented on it. This is very important here. Now we're just going to take them apart like God did with the turtle. Orban said, Zelensky lashed out at us because Hungarians don't want to die for Ukraine. We don't want our children coming back from the front in coffins, and we don't want Hungarian money going to Ukraine, Orban wrote. Oh, you manipulative toad. So now he's talking about children in coffins. Why don't you come to Ukraine yourself and see everything with your own eyes? Better yet, visit the frontline cities? Well, look, Orban is changing his rhetoric again. Once again, Orban is playing the victim who just wants to live in his cozy Hungarian comfort while Ukraine burns and blazes next door. But the thing is, when the neighbor's house is on fire, the flames don't ask who has a fire extinguisher at home. So if the fire gets strong enough, it'll burn down yours too. Secondly, the oil mosquito is twisting the whole point again. No one is asking Hungary to send its soldiers to the front, let alone children, as Orban claims. Ukraine is simply asking that Hungarian policy not work in Putin's interests. That's all. And finally, yet another sign that Orban is not just not an ally, he's basically a spy sitting at the table of the European Union. He's not even trying to balance anymore. He's openly pushing forward, defending the Kremlin's interests, and of course, cynically hiding behind Hungarian children. But it's children across Europe who need to be protected from politicians like that. But you know that Biba doesn't act alone. There's also Boba, or more precisely Fico. In other words, Slovakia is against the 18th package of sanctions. As they say, Biba and Boba are two of a kind. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico stated that Bratislava will not support the new EU sanctions package against Russia and Tioniv. The European Commission does not provide the country with a solution for energy substitution. Blatant blackmail. So I'll keep buying Russian gas and oil well, although how exactly he's going to buy it is still an open question. Come on, give me some kind of alternative, then give me discounts so I can keep buying just like I do now at the same price. In other words, at the same time, the European Commission has officially confirmed its intention to include in the new sanctions package against Nord Stream a measure to lower the oil price cap to $45 per barrel. Well, in general, everything is just wonderful. But in reality, Fico says, yes, I admit that Russia is a source of threat, but we are not ready to fight it unless you compensate us financially. So let's imagine after all that he's not acting alone. He is within the European Union. He is making these demands to Brussels. And on top of that, he also raises the issue of nuclear fuel. It's not just oil and gas. Fico is not only afraid of losing Russian oil and gas, he's also afraid of shutting down the nuclear reactors. So this means that he simply needs to be offered some kind of alternative. The US, France, and the Czech Republic have already offered alternatives, but he doesn't want them. You see, what can you do? Well, in general, it's long past time to change the rhetoric with Orban and Fico. There are absolutely real tools to make sure they stop being such pro-Russian scumbags. Let's speak plainly. Slovakia and Hungary act as if they're the center of some kind of European pain, as if they're suffering more than anyone else. While Ukrainian cities are living under bombs, entire buildings are being destroyed. While Putin is carrying out massive shelling, they, excuse my French, are putting on this pathetic circus over their supposed suffering, over the lowering of the oil price cap. The situations are completely incomparable. Ukraine, Slovakia, and Hungary. And it's necessary to explain not only what will happen to them if they don't vote for the sanctions, but also what they will lose. In other words, the time has come to deprive them of certain European perks. Why not? Although Orban understands this perfectly well, so manners aside, but since our program is not only about who's to blame, who's the bad guy, but also about what to do, so I've put together and broken down 7 effective tools for those who like to cozy up to old man Kabaev. So the first mechanism for deprivation is very simple: cutting off access to European Union funding. This mechanism was introduced in 2021 and allows for the suspension of payments from the European Union budget if a country violates the rule of law or jeopardizes the interests of the Union, for example, by sabotaging sanctions. Isn't that great? It is great. Hungary, this has already been applied to Hungary, and the European Commission has frozen 22 billion euros of EU funds for Hungary. Orban is constantly whining, "Unfreeze it, I want the money." But this can be expanded, including as a tool of pressure for sabotaging the European Union's foreign policy. That's wonderful. A very effective tool. Freezing structural funds is the second tool. That is, payments for regional programs can be stopped. This includes infrastructure, social programs, and industrial support. For Slovakia and Hungary, this is really very painful. Really extremely. Judicial pressure is the third tool through the European Union. So if they ignore sanction policies and undermine the unity of foreign policy, they can be taken to the Court of Justice of the European Union, and the court can impose a fine, including a daily penalty. This happened with Poland and the Czech Republic when they refused to accept the quotas. In those cases, they were hit with very severe fines every single day. The fourth point is the most important, the most powerful deprivation of voting rights. Article 7 of the Treaty on the European Union. This is the ultimate measure. In theory, in practice, no one has ever reached this point, but in theory, it can lead to the loss of voting rights. That is, it is extremely difficult. Unanimity of all countries is required. But the political effect would be absolutely insane, devastating. In other words, the country would become a complete outcast. And guess who became the precedent for the application of this Article 7? Of course, it was Hungary, for violations in the judicial and media spheres. But the case was frozen, although it might be unblocked. In other words, it was possible to initiate Article 7 because Orban monopolized the courts, expelled non-profit organizations, and purged the information space and media. But for what he's doing now, for some reason, they are not willing to do so yet. And of course, the blocking, point 5, the blocking of national interests, is a wonderful story. This is cross-blocking. The approval of investment projects, various trade agreements, and visa matters is being delayed everything. And a wide variety of different structures are being put on hold. Media and diplomatic pressure is when all the other representatives of the European Union just start criticizing them left and right. And that's happening right now. For example, Macron and Tusk are doing a great job and also involve the opposition and civil society. Orban recently was whining that Ukraine is acting through the opposition. Oh, what a shame. We don't know anything about that. We have no idea at all what's going on there. And in general, after the war, I think the conversation will be different. And yes, the rule that's already being applied is the coalition of the willing. That is, it's possible to form coalitions without Orban, or say without Orban and Fico, and through these coalitions bypassing their veto, especially on issues of aid, arms procurement, and sanctions agreements, push through the necessary decisions. Overall, it's a good approach. These tools are being used against Orban by almost everyone, but not forcefully enough. But as for Fico, he has hardly faced any consequences yet. I've put together a sort of summary table here. So for Fico, the pressure is very weak. There's only media and diplomatic pressure so far, and that's it. But that's not how it should be. It shouldn't be like that. After all, it was Fico, not Orban, who went to Putin to celebrate. So, in short, Hungary has already faced consequences, but even so, it's clear that Orban is being kept on a tight leash there. Meanwhile, Slovakia is in the spotlight. But I think that for those who support Putin, preemptive warning type punishments are simply a must-have, as they say. And friends, let me remind you, we have an important fundraiser for our friends at the Global Drone Academy, who have already trained thousands of UAV operators of all kinds, top-notch, highly professional specialists. We now understand that this war has essentially become a war of drones. That's why the more UAV operators we have, the stronger we are and the more lives we can save. So I ask you to support this fundraiser. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video and also in the comments. There you will also find the card number for the Global Drone Academy Foundation, as well as a PayPal option for those who want to help from abroad. Thank you so much. We don't have much left to go. Honestly, I thought that with all this talk going on, we would really struggle with fundraising. But you are amazing. You are doing a fantastic job. I think everyone understands that this balding scum needs to be hit, and hit again. Even when it raises its paws and says, that's it, that's it, that's it. It still needs to be hit and hit. So friends, please support the fundraiser for our warriors. I'm always very grateful to you for that, and you know it. So now, regarding the come to Ukraine and see everything with your own eyes topic, obviously neither Orban nor Fico will come to Ukraine. But today, the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vucic, will visit Ukraine. There is a Ukraine and Southeast Europe summit taking place there. This is actually his first visit since the start of the full-scale invasion. He will be in Odessa. But while these two oil Draculas, Orban and Fico, are suffering in their own countries, whining about hardships, some have turned out to be a bit more cunning. I think that Vucic has decided to play it smart. He tries to please both sides. And recently the Russians directly accused him, saying that his Serbian companies are selling weapons to Ukraine through some intermediaries. He said, "We'll look into it." So you see, he's a real weather vane. And Vucic is the king of drama. In other words, he's an actor without an Oscar, but still a politician with a highly developed skill set. Kuchma used to call this multi-vector policy, but in plain language it's called being cunning, so he understands that he needs to be here, there, and everywhere. That's why he'll be here. Two think they'll do everything possible to make sure he goes and sees Irpin and Bucha with his own eyes. Of course, no one will let him anywhere near the front lines, but at the very least, I think he'll still get to see some things. In Odessa where he'll be, there was literally destruction just a day ago, so I think they'll take him there. Well, they won't rub his nose in it, but they'll show him, take a look, your buddy is launching attacks on Odessa and all over Ukraine, on every city. So I think it will be quite an eye-opener for him. And if you thought that Russia had abandoned the idea of Ukraine as the younger brother, we are one people, then you are very much mistaken. And in fact, Medinsky, the head of the negotiation group, said, "The mistake of Western countries." First I'll quote him as he says it, and then we'll break it down. The mistake of Western countries in the conflict in Ukraine lies in the fact that they view it as similar to the confrontation between England and France, two countries with their own history and culture, he said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal. According to him, the conflict in Ukraine, as he puts it, in his view, is a confrontation between two states with a common language and culture, which are essentially one people and are inevitably destined to be close. It is similar to a conflict between two brothers, the older and the younger, about who is smarter and more important. This conflict unfortunately deepens our differences, and that is precisely why we want it to end as soon as possible. Well, of course, yes. How twisted they really are, right? I'll kill my brother's family so that he understands how much I love him, and then he'll definitely come back. However, this is not just another idiotic statement from one of these gulsher. It's an ideological construct and a carefully packaged tool of Russian propaganda. Look, it's like, well, we're supposedly two peoples, but here, first of all, Ukraine's sovereignty is being devalued, as if to say this is our younger brother, meaning Russia is just the younger brother. It's the legitimization of aggression under the guise of an internal family squabblia conflict within the family. We'll sort it out ourselves. And it shifts international perception from a war between states to a civil war within a single people. They're starting to push this narrative now. Orban, by the way, I mentioned recently on the program that Orban was the quickest to pick up on this narrative and started repeating similar talking points. In other words, this is classic Big Brother rhetoric. Ukraine supposedly is not a separate state, but a lost part of Russia, which the treacherous West tore away and is now helping to fight against its own kin. And it's not like we decided to fight Russia on our own. At least, that's their view. We are just puppets of the West. As a certified puppet of the West myself, I can tell you, go back to where you came from, to your swamp, and forget about Ukraine. There will never be any brothers or sisters here. And look at what else they're doing. This is also about expanding their approach to other countries. Like, well, these are our people. Some of them speak the same language there. And if one language means one nation, then by that logic, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and the Baltic countries are also under threat. Basically, anywhere there's even a single Russian speaker, that means it's all ours. And about being doomed to be closest. So they're also trying to monopolize everything they can reach. Remember how they used to say that the Russian world never ends. It never ends anywhere. Well, it does end. It'll end right there with a snuff box to the bald head. And then fragmentation. The smaller the pieces that remain of the Russian Federation, the less danger they will pose. And again, about being doomed to be close. That phrase really struck me, in that there's supposedly no way for us to escape it. Medinsky, whether consciously or not, used a phrase that is often employed by three categories of people. Abusers, it's basically their signature move. You're nothing without me. You'll never get away from me. Devaluing and depersonalizing the person they live with. Abusers, that's one. Maniacs, as in you're mine, even if you don't realize it. We were made to be together, and you can't escape. And then there are the fanatical cultists. You belong to us forever. You were lost, and we brought you back. So you see, in essence, we already know who we're dealing with. But yes, we can't move the boundary. But I have a feeling that Ukraine, which Putin has choked on, will ultimately trigger the process of the collapse of the Russian Federation as it exists now. That is, people in the Soviet Union also once thought it was huge, strong, monolithic, great, and indivisible. But history has corrected all of that. And Medinsky really reminds me of a classic high-functioning psychopath, the kind who often turns from a nerd into a maniac in Hollywood movies. You can just sense the sadism coming from him, given his statements about, I would call him the brotherly strangler. Like those different maniacs, the Bitsevsky maniac or some other one. This is the brotherly strangler, along with his embraces. And I asked artificial intelligence and requested a brief description of Medinsky. Right now, just like I was the first time, you might be a little surprised. But before I get to that, let me give you a quick attention test for just a few seconds. Take a look at which channel you're watching me on. The channel name is right below the video. My official channel is called Boris Tizengausen. Many channels repost my videos. Let them put it. But I recommend you to subscribe to the author's channel. It's easy to do and takes just a few seconds. Just type Boris Tizengausen into the YouTube search, and you'll see my original channel appear with a light background and a subscribe button. Click that button, and we're together. And be sure to leave comments. So I asked artificial intelligence, give me a profile of Medinsky. And here's what, I've really gotten hooked on ChatGPT. Some people write to me saying, Boris, be careful so it doesn't take over your channel and at some point it'll come out and replace me. And maybe it wouldn't even be that noticeable, although I don't believe that. Although a friend of mine showed me a video he made with me where I'm speaking with my own voice, but saying things I've never actually said. He even gets the lip sync right. So there I am sitting and talking, but it's not really me, even though it's my voice. So here's the thing. Medinsky is not a madman, here's the description. Medinsky is not a crazed fanatic, but a technical apologist for the system who turns imperial aggression into an intellectual discussion. He looks like a man with a book, but speaks like an abuser quoting Stalin from under a Tolstoy cover. He believes in what he says not because it's true, but because it's safer for him that way. He's the type of official ideologue for whom it's more important to adapt arguments to the agenda than to defend a personal position. And at the end, I asked ChatGPT to come up with a nickname for him, but in my own style. So it came up with the following: the taxidermist historian, and explain why. He resurrects a dead empire and stretches it over neighboring countries. I think that's just perfect.